I run a six-figure business selling digital products on platforms like Etsy and Creative Market. And one of the questions I get a lot is, how much does it actually cost to run something like this? So in this video, I'm going to break down what I spend every month so you can see what it actually looks like. So before we break down the expenses, let me show you how much actually came in first. From Etsy, I made $11,193.20. And from Creative Market, I made $6,345.58. That brings my total revenue for this month to $17,538.78. And just to clarify, all of these numbers are in Canadian dollars since I'm based in Canada. Now, one thing I really struggled with when I was starting was actually knowing how much of that I got to keep at the end of the month. I could see the money coming in, but I didn't have a clear way to see my expenses, my fees, and what my actual profit was at the end of the month. And for a while, I was honestly running my business without fully knowing how much I was actually bringing home. I also feel like a lot of traditional banks aren't really built for how modern small businesses operate. Everything just sits in one account, and it makes it really hard to separate things like expenses, savings, or even taxes. And as a beginner, the idea of opening multiple accounts just felt complicated and honestly a bit intimidating. So when I came across Relay, I thought this was actually a really smart solution for that. Relay is an online banking platform built for small business owners, and what it does really well is give you a clear view of your cash flow so you can actually see what you're earning, what you're spending, and what you're saving all in one place. One of the biggest things that stood out to me is that you can open an account completely online in just a few minutes, so you don't have to go into a bank at all. And inside your account, you can create up to 20 individual accounts, which makes it so much easier to organize your money. So for example, you can have separate accounts for things like your profit, owner's pay, operating expenses, and even your taxes, so you're not mixing everything together in one account. You can also issue 50 Visa debit cards for different accounts and set spending limits, which helps keeps everything organized, especially as your business grows. And honestly, this is something I wish I had earlier, because with traditional banks, you usually have to pay for multiple accounts, which kind of limits how you manage your money. You can also send and receive ACH transfers, domestic and international wires, which is really helpful if you're running an online business. And one of the best parts is that there are no hidden fees, no overdraft fees, and no minimum balance requirements. If you're a solopreneur or just getting started, they have plans that start at just $0 per month, which already gives you access to the features I just talked about. So if you want a more organized way to manage your business finances and get better control of your money, you can check out Relay. I'll leave a link in the description box. Alright, so now let's get into the actual expenses I pay every month to run my business. So starting with Canva. This is one of my main business expenses because I sell Canva templates on platforms like Etsy and Creative Market. And if you're starting a digital product business, this is most likely going to be one of your first expenses as well. I personally pay for Canva Pro for individuals, and I'm on the yearly plan because it ends up being cheaper. It comes out to about $150 per year, which is roughly $12.50 per month compared to around $18 if you were paying monthly. Now, the reason I pay for Canva Pro is because I use it for pretty much everything in my business. Not just for creating the templates that I sell, but also for my marketing materials, my product photos, and even some of my video editing. So I get a lot of use out of it. And while you can technically design using the free version of Canva, if you're planning to sell Canva templates, you will most likely need Canva Pro because you need it to generate template links, which is how you actually deliver your products to your customers. So for me, this is definitely a recurring expense that's 100% worth it. Now, I quickly want to go over Etsy fees so you understand how this works. There are three main fees you need to know about. The first one is a listing fee. This is the fee you pay to publish a product on Etsy, and it's 20 cents USD per listing. Each listing stays active for 4 months or until the item sells. And if it does sell, the listing automatically renews and you'll be charged the 20 cents again. The second fee is a transaction fee. When you make a sale, Etsy takes 6.5% from the total sale price. The third fee is a payment processing fee. This is the fee for handling the payment, and it's usually around 3 to 4% of the sale, plus a small fixed fee of 25 cents. So just to give you a quick example, if you sell a product for $50, Etsy would take about 6.5% for the transaction fee, which is around 3.25 cents. Then for payment processing, let's say roughly 3%, and that's about $1.50, plus the 25 cents fixed fee. So in total, you're paying roughly around $5 in fees on a $50 sale. If you want more details on all of this, you can always go to Etsy's website. I'll put the link on screen here. This is where you'll find the full breakdown of fees for sellers. I do recommend going through it if you want a deeper understanding. Now, those are the main fees you need to understand when selling on Etsy, but in reality, when you look at your actual Etsy statements, there are a few additional fees that get included as well. Things like regulatory operating fees and taxes on seller fees. I'm not going to go too deep into those because they can vary depending on your location, but I'll show you what my actual fees looks like so you can get a realistic idea. Now, for this specific period, I made about $11,193 in revenue, and my total Etsy fees came out to $1,542.69. Now, when you look at this breakdown, you'll notice there are also some credits in here. These are basically small offsets, things like Etsy Plus credits or minor adjustments that reduce your overall fee slightly. Now, going into the main fees, the biggest one here is the transaction fee, which was about $730. This makes sense because it's a percentage of every sale, so the more you sell, the higher this number gets. Next is the payment processing fee at around $445, which again is tied to each transaction since it's the fee for handling payments. Then we have listing fees, which came out to about $100. This is from publishing and renewing listings over time. Now, you'll also see something called a regulatory operating fee. This is a small percentage fee, around 1.15% of your order total, that Etsy charges in certain countries based on local regulations. So this one came out to about $129 for me. And then there's tax on seller fees, which is basically tax applied to the fees that Etsy charges you. Depending on your location, Etsy collects this and remits it to the appropriate tax authorities. So for me, that came out to about $152. So when you add all of this together, that's how we get to the total fees of $1,542.69 for this period. Next is my Etsy Plus subscription. Now, this one is completely optional. You don't need Etsy Plus to start a shop, but personally, I like having it. It's $10 USD per month plus tax, but since I'm based in Canada, the amount fluctuates depending on the exchange rate. So this month, I paid $14.34. The reason I keep Etsy Plus is because it comes with a few small perks that I actually use. You get monthly credits like $5 Etsy ads credits and 15 listing credits, which help offset the cost a bit. It also gives you more customization options for your shop, like different banner layouts and featured listings, which I like because it makes my shop look a bit more branded and put together. So again, this is not something you need when you're starting, but for me, I personally enjoy having it and I do get some value out of it. Next is my custom domain, which is kind of tied to my Etsy Plus subscription. One of the perks of Etsy Plus is that you get a discount on a custom domain through their partner, which is Hover. So instead of using the usual Etsy URL, you can have your own custom web address that redirects directly to your shop. I personally use this because it just looks a lot cleaner whenever I'm sharing my shop link on platforms like Pinterest. Again, this is not a requirement, but it's a nice extra to have, especially since I already have Etsy Plus. This is billed annually and I pay $28 for the entire year. So if you break that down monthly, it comes out to roughly $2.30 per month. Next are Etsy ads. Now this one is completely optional, but personally I do use Etsy ads in my shop and I've found that my return on investment has been really worth it. If you want a deeper breakdown, I actually have a full video where I go through my Etsy ads in detail and show how much I spent over a year and how much I made from it. So I'll link that in the description if you want to check it out. Now for this specific period, there are two types of ads that show up in my fees. The first one is Etsy ads. These are ads that run directly within Etsy. So your listings get promoted in Etsy search and other parts of the platform to help bring in more visibility and sales. For me, this came out to $1,637.13. The second one is offsite ads. These are ads that Etsy runs outside of the platform on places like Google, Facebook, or Pinterest. And if someone clicks on that ad and makes a purchase, Etsy takes a fee for that. That came out to $42 for me. So in total, I spent about $1,679 on ads for this period. Now, based on Etsy's ad stats, that generated about $4,475 in revenue in USD, which is roughly around 6,220 Canadian dollars. So overall, that's a pretty healthy return on ad spend, which is why I continue using Etsy ads in my shop. Next is Creative Market. So I also sell in Creative Market, and I'm selling the same products that I have in my Etsy shop. Now, in terms of fees, Creative Market works a bit differently compared to Etsy. Instead of multiple smaller fees, they take a larger percentage of each sale. They typically take about a 50% cut, but that already includes things like payment processing and marketing, and there are no listing fees either. So for this period, my total revenue was $4,565 in USD, and my total earnings, or what I actually took home, was $2,312.25. So if you look at the difference, that means about $2,252.75 went to fees. I'm going to put the Canadian conversions beside each amount so you have an idea. So yes, the fees are definitely higher compared to Etsy, but for me, I don't really mind because this is essentially just extra income. I'm not actively putting in more work. I'm just uploading the same products and letting them sell on another platform. Next is my Placeit subscription. Now this one is definitely optional. You don't need Placeit to run a digital product business. I personally use it to create some of my mock-ups for my product photos. That said, there are already a lot of mock-ups available in Canva, so I would definitely recommend starting there first. But if you want more variety or different styles, then Placeit is a good option to look into. I personally pay for the yearly plan because it's cheaper, comes out to about $130 Canadian per year, which is roughly around $11 per month. And for me, it's worth it because I use it quite a bit when creating my product photos. Next are my accountant fees. And just to clarify, most of the expenses I've talked about so far are specifically related to selling digital products on Etsy and Creative Market. This next one is a bit different because it also covers other parts of my business. My business isn't just selling digital products. I'm also a content creator, so I earn through brand deals, YouTube ads, and affiliate marketing, and I also sell digital products to my audience. So there are a lot more moving parts in my business, which requires more detailed bookkeeping. That's why this is one of my bigger monthly expenses. But I do want to say this is not something you need when you're just starting. If you're a beginner and your business is still simple, you can absolutely manage your books on your own. For me personally, this just isn't my strongest area, which is why I chose to hire an accountant. And the amount you pay will really vary depending on your situation, where you're at in your business, and how complex things are. I've been in business for about 5 years now, and I've been working with my accountant for that long as well. So there are a lot of things factored into this cost. But just to give you an idea, I currently pay about $630 per month for my accountant. Now, the last thing I want to quickly touch on is taxes. This is one of those things that's a bit harder to give an exact number for because it really depends on your situation, your total income, where you live, and how your business is set up. For me personally, my income doesn't just come from Etsy and Creative Market. I also have other sources of income, and I now run a corporation, so that changes things a bit in terms of how I'm taxed. So instead of giving you my specific number, I just want to explain how this generally works. When you run a business, you're typically taxed on your profit, not your revenue. So that's your total income minus your expenses. And from that, a portion goes to taxes, which again will vary depending on your situation. So what I personally recommend, especially if you're just starting, is to get into the habit of setting aside a percentage of your income for taxes. A common range people use is around 20 to 30% just to be safe. So just to give you a simple example using my numbers, from this period, I made about $17,538 in revenue, and my expenses were around $7,023. So that leaves me with about $10,500 in profit, which is the amount that would typically be taxable. If you were to set aside around 20 to 30%, that would be somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 for taxes. Again, this is just an estimate, and if you're currently working a 9 to 5 while doing this on the side, just keep in mind that your business income gets added on top of your regular income, which could potentially put you in a higher tax bracket. And if you're unsure about any of this, it's always a good idea to speak to a licensed professional like an accountant who can give you advice based on your specific situation. So that's a full breakdown of what it actually costs for me to run a 6-figure digital product business every month. And if you're thinking about starting your own, hopefully this gives you a clearer idea of what to expect going into it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It really helps my channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!